I think that the crazy thing is that out of one side of the mouth, the left cry that the Supreme Court is doing the right thing by blocking all of Trump's advances that the election was stolen. But now all of a sudden they're ruling in his favor. Make your mind up. If they're supporting Trump, then they would have allowed the election interference, election fraud cases to go straight through. They would have ruled on it in Trump's favor, but they didn't. They didn't even look at it. So I think the Supreme Court is balanced and is fair. They just don't like the fact that people are leaning more conservative. I don't like everything the Supreme Court does, but it's fair and balanced and co-equal branches of the government.
Hey everybody, this is Troy over at Uncomfortable Truths. Thanks for checking me out. Now today we have to talk about the Piers Morgan interview because we did have a couple people from the left, Cenk Uyger and Destiny, both pretty much come out and advocate that we need to reform the Supreme Court. It's too conservative and something has to change with it. Well, this is extremely interesting because while they're talking about how corrupt the Supreme Court is, for years, they've actually been telling people, no, you need to have faith and trust in our legal system as we use it to go after Donald Trump, our political opponent, because of course the court cannot be politicized and it's something we absolutely need to trust. Well, apparently that's not the case anymore because when it comes to Democrats, they're willing to change their position in the blink of an eye if it means that they can hold on to power or get a hold of some more of it. But Officer Tatum's not letting them get away with this stuff because it's absolutely ridiculous that 5 minutes ago, they're giving big, wet, sloppy glaze jobs to the courts when they were actually going after Trump. Because then all of a sudden, the court was something that we couldn't question. You couldn't say that there was any sort of lawfare going on against political opponents because that would be ridiculous. And we need to respect the institutions. We have to respect the courts when it's in favor of the Democrats. But when it goes against what the Democrats want, well, then all of a sudden, no, we might need to do something about the court. Maybe we need to set up term limits. Maybe we need to actually make sure that we pack it like Pete Buttigieg is saying. And this isn't just something that a couple of people on YouTube are actually coming out and saying, yeah, something needs to be done. No, the current president of the United States, who can't tie his own shoes and doesn't know where he's at, as he's leaving office, is still trying to make his legacy reforming the courts. So because the court is now conservative after being liberal for about 60 years, well, now all of a sudden something has to be done because it's completely corrupt and unacceptable. Well, hey, I'm not actually necessarily opposed to court reform. However, it does seem very strange that now that the Democrats are losing in the courts, that now they think it's time for us to actually go through and actually make these changes. But for the majority of people on the left, this is not a principled position. The only reason why they want to restructure the Supreme Court is because Democrats did not put the majority of Supreme Court justices on the bench. Had it been Democrats who had appointed the majority of justices, there is no question whatsoever that they would be advocating for keeping the court exactly how it is. So the reason why they want to change things is simply because they want to have more power, and it's never enough. Now, Officer Tatum does a great job of saying, hey, look, this is really convenient that all of a sudden you guys are for the court, then you're against it, now you're for it. You're just going wherever the wind blows. But there are problems with the court. And am I opposed to term limits on the court? Absolutely not. Just like I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to term limits when it came to Congress. Now, the details obviously matter, but the idea that there's no reforms that could be beneficial are absurd. The reason why we can't trust the Democrats now is because they're only doing this because it's politically expedient. But the other conservative guest, Josie, explained the Republicans have had to put up with a liberal Supreme Court for decades. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles because at the end of the day, it was Democrats that got to appoint those justices. So we had to put up with that liberal court. And honestly, the court made decisions that a conservative court probably wouldn't have made. And that's too bad because we as conservatives have to actually respect the system that's in place, which is why you can't just decide that you're going to change the court because you aren't liking the outcomes that you're getting 100% of the time, which is what she's explaining here.
Hang on, Josie, the reality is, isn't it, that had it been the other way around, had Joe Biden been able to pack the Supreme Court with three very progressive judges, I think Republicans would have gone completely nuts. And there's the problem, is that it doesn't really matter which side is doing it. If you have the ability in one 4-year term to have that kind of significant sea change in the makeup of the Supreme Court, doesn't it lose its ability to be impartial?
Well, we had a liberal leading Supreme Court for 60 years. And now it's the first time where it's switched and it's starting to lean conservative again for the first time in a long time. Now, if you want to add term limits to the Supreme Court, that would require a constitutional amendment of Article 3. And that would mean two-thirds of Congress and 3/4 of the states would have to agree to term limits on the Supreme Court. So that's just not something you can wave a wand and do.
So Josie is 100% correct about what it would take for this liberal and democratic agenda to happen when it comes to restructuring the Supreme Court. They would have to go as far as to pass a constitutional amendment. So they would have to change the Constitution in order to actually implement the changes they want to see. Well, they don't have that kind of support, so it's not going to happen, which is why you have liberals like Pete Buttigieg, who's coming out and saying, well, hey, look, we're just going to undermine the entire system. We're going to undermine the Supreme Court, and we're just going to appoint as many liberal justices on the Supreme Court as we want, because there isn't a limit to the amount of Supreme Court justices that can be put on the bench. So we'll just dilute all of the Republicans' power that they've gained and earned by winning elections, because we don't actually care about that. Now, to be clear, and to Cenk's credit, he has actually come out and said, yeah, I'm not in favor of packing the Supreme Court. That's unfair. And a lot of Democrats have. But a lot of Democrats are saying, look, we don't care what it takes in order for us to win, in order for our agenda to get passed. If it's lawfare, that's fine. We're in favor of the court when it does what we want. But the minute the court doesn't do exactly what we tell it to, then absolutely we should restructure it so that we are always getting everything that we want. Now, I do urge everybody to go ahead and watch the full interview, because actually the Democrats, Destiny and Cenk, actually do make a couple of good points. And Destiny especially brings up the issue with Mitch McConnell refusing to allow Democrats to actually appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, which in hindsight really wasn't a very conservative position, because we undermined our own argument by saying, well, hey, look, because Democrats are now trying to appoint somebody, we're going to hold off and we're going to let the people decide. Well, now when we're out trying to defend the Supreme Court and the current makeup, it just looks like many of us are hypocrites, despite the fact that a lot of conservatives are saying, hey, look, this is our system. I respect the system and I want to respect the system as it stands. So I'm not in favor of this. So I do think it's a very interesting video. Go ahead and check it out. It's in the description below. And that's all I have for this one. But do me a favor, go ahead and hit like and subscribe and let me know what you thought. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everybody.